A veteran NBC News analyst has quit the network after 3 decades with a blast.
But he described the national news media obsessed with the Trump circus.
Our responsibility is to cover the government, not just the president.
By taking the bait of daily distractions served up on Twitter, has the mainstream media failed its mission?
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the stories we're covering this week. News alert for the U.S. media. Being tough on Trump can lead to being pro-military. Think about it. There's an election coming up in Nigeria, and the raid on a newspaper there is probably no coincidence. Conspiracy theories, they're everywhere, and journalists aren't really sure how to deal with them. Plus, President El-Sisi and the interview his government did not want to see on the air.
They say you're a military dictator.
The one the Egyptian media pretended did not happen. As parting shots go, it was a good one. It made news. When William Arkin, a veteran national security reporter with NBC News and MSNBC, wrote his resignation email last week, he shared it with his colleagues. It was then leaked to other news outlets. Among Arkin's criticisms of his former employer and other mainstream news outlets in the U.S., that by incessantly covering the presidency of Donald Trump, the network is being held hostage by Trump. That in its reflexively anti-Trump coverage, it has become even more pro-military. That NBC and MSNBC are now captives of the security state. Back in his days with the Washington Post, Arkin worked on an investigation called Top Secret America on the rapid growth of the U.S. intelligence industry post 9/11. So his critique of the establishment media is worth listening to. He knows the subject matter. However, American news consumers are tuning into MSNBC and its anti-Trump agenda in record numbers. Armed with those kinds of ratings, what corporate-owned news channel would risk alienating its shareholders by changing tack? Our starting point this week, NBC's headquarters in New York City. William Arkin in his resignation email to his employer on the perils of Trump derangement syndrome, the impulse to oppose any and all of the president's policies regardless of their merit.
Of course he is an ignorant and incompetent imposter, and yet I'm alarmed at how quick NBC is to mechanically argue the contrary, to be in favor of policies that just spell more conflict and more war. Really? We shouldn't get out of Syria?
And by the way, we're knocking the hell out of ISIS. We'll be coming out of Syria like very soon.
So to recap for everybody, Pentagon, not happy. Putin, so happy.
We shouldn't go for the bold move of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula?
Why did that happen? What was that for? No U.S. president has ever agreed to meet with a North Korean dictator before.
And even on Russia, do we really yearn for the Cold War?
In almost everything we see, hear, touch, and feel and smell, it's Russia.
And don't even get me started with the FBI. What? We now lionize this historically destructive institution?
Everything's just so anti-Trump. There's no conversation about whether or not these are actually positions that have merit. There is no conversation about whether or not we should have even gone into Syria, whether or not it's even legal. We don't see like actual coverage of what's happening, except for to condemn the president for not wanting to be there.
He has earned 98% of your ire. Okay, don't ruin it by actually being reflexively against the 2% that makes sense. We should definitely get out of Syria. We should 100% get out of Afghanistan. But it's irrelevant what I think. I know a huge percentage of the right wing and a huge percentage of the left wing who want to withdraw from those wars. So are any of them represented in the media? And the answer is no, because the media has decided we're going to put up a wall, if you will, of fear and loathing against Donald Trump.
Everything about Bill Arkin's critique with regard to the mainstream media's treatment of Donald Trump is false. The idea that they are anti-Trump, well, no, they're in the business of telling the truth, and Trump is in the business of lies. In the past month alone, according to the Washington Post, he has told an average of 15 lies a day. To be anti-Trump is to be pro-truth. So I don't give any of Arkin's critique on those particular issues any credence whatsoever.
Some aspects of this story are unique to the Trump era, but not all.
American and coalition forces.
Whether it's the Bush administration invading Iraq in 2003,
We will hunt down terrorists.
Obama ordering the bombing of ISIL in Syria in 2014, or Donald Trump conducting airstrikes against Syrian government targets in 2017, the coverage is one-sided, and the voices reflect that.
Why didn't we take out all of his military capability?
Like all three U.S. 24-hour news channels, MSNBC hires ex-military and intelligence figures, many of them now employed by the defense and security industries. The networks call them analysts, which is misleading because many of them are advocates. According to William Arkin, the preponderance of those voices and how much airtime they are given on stories such as Trump's recent decision to pull out of the Syrian conflict are evidence that U.S. news networks have become captives of the security state.
So when I started as a commentator on MSNBC and NBC in 1999, there were others who were from the academic world, there were others who were activists. Now, all we hear are retired generals and admirals and high-level government officials.
All of you have so many credentials, we don't really know where to start, but let's start with the general. He's the only one of us who has 4 stars.
And all we hear is a kind of partisan analysis of how bad Trump is because he's breaking with past administration policy or whatever. The American public suffers.
It's amazing to look at how many former national security state officials are on television. I mean, you'd expect maybe in a totalitarian society to have former intelligence officials being your experts, but we're supposed to be democratic, and I can't think of people less qualified to opine on politics and to represent the interests of average people than those officials who have spent their careers warmongering and running secret programs.
Michael, first of all, what more can you tell us about
The U.S. media's addiction to ex-military and intelligence voices is well documented. A 2008 investigation by the New York Times exposed how, at the outset of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a virtual conveyor belt running between the Pentagon and network television studios. The Times won a Pulitzer Prize for that piece of journalism. What changed thereafter was nothing. The conflicts kept coming.
I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons.
So do the ex-generals, who the Pentagon labeled message force multipliers.
I love a good goodbye note.
And as William Arkin pointed out in an interview on CNN, the U.S. media somehow managed to accommodate all those pro-war voices without even knowing where some of the conflicts are taking place.
When I think about how we cover the news, I think about, are we at war or are we not at war? And even if we're in this so-called perpetual war, or the long war as the Pentagon calls it, I want to know that it's being covered with the aggressiveness that's necessary. Right now, Brian, we are bombing 9 countries around the world, and I defy you to even name what they are. That's how bad our coverage of warfare is.
I'll be honest with you, I cannot. I think there's some...
And he's not a military expert, he's a news media critic. But I wanted to make the point, and in fact it's been interesting, even my colleagues have said, what are those 9 countries again?
Show me any mainstream media outlet that is anti-war. They'll say, oh, what do you mean? That's not fair, we're not pro-war either. Total BS. The corporate media is massively pro-war. So when you combine those two forces of being against Donald Trump and pro-war, when he announces withdrawal, they hate it and they fight him with a passion that you haven't seen in a long time.
There are times when that just disdain for him gets in the way of producing really good news, really good commentary. And we have seen that with the lionization of not just Mathis.
I think Jim Mattis's departure was different from a lot of the other previous departures we've seen because he is so highly regarded.
But when Comey was leaving the FBI, we've seen this kind of happen after everyone leaves, that there's this moment where it's like, oh, they're so great because they've left. But it doesn't really look at how these people have contributed to everything that we're saying is a problem with Trump.
MSNBC, which declined to answer our questions, can live with the criticism and just point to the ratings. They show a clear appetite for anti-Trump TV. Viewers clearly don't mind the pro-war bias and happily take in political talking points from former Trump officials who have left the administration. Last month, for the first time in 17 years, MSNBC won the ratings war with Fox, attracting more viewers in the key demographic that advertisers want.
MSNBC has done well in the ratings in the Trump era, but I think part of that is a reflection of the fact that whenever you have a Democratic president, the sort of so-called unofficial opposition network like Fox News will do better. And in this case, the beneficiary of this dynamic is MSNBC because you have Trump in power.
Most cable news is crap, and there's a lot of crap on MSNBC. There's less crap on MSNBC than there is on CNN, and far less than there is on Fox. I don't understand why MSNBC is the problem. They see themselves as the voice of the resistance, but the idea that this is the problem rather than Fox is the problem or CNN is the problem, it's insane.
Or it's possible that Fox News is not the only problematic news network on the American airwaves. And that's not drawing a false equivalence, equating MSNBC's occasional blind spots with Fox's constant crimes against journalism. It's just stating the facts, the points that William Arkin made on his way out the door. We're looking at other media stories that are on our radar this week with one of our producers, Johanna Hoos. Joe, Egypt's president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, sits down for an interview with 60 Minutes in the U.S. last week and then tries to stop that interview from going on the air. Why even agree to do it in the first place?
He had to know what was coming, right? But as one of the show's producers said later, it's almost as if Sisi was unfamiliar with the program and just wanted to appear on it because a number of other Arab leaders have done the same. CBS host Scott Pelley asked some pretty direct questions about the president's record on human rights, the kinds of questions Sisi is never has to face from Egyptian journalists.
Mr. President, the organization Human Rights Watch says that there are 60,000 political prisoners that you're holding today as we sit here.
Sisi clearly thought the interview had gone badly. According to that same producer on the shoot, by the time she got home from the interview, there was an email from her contact at the Egyptian embassy formally requesting that the interview not be aired.
Now, holding back that interview or burying it is not something that CBS News could even consider, but the president has had more success in controlling the media output back home on this, hasn't he?
Much more. According to one of the few independent outlets still operating in Egypt, Madam Masred, the president's office instructed domestic media not to cover the 60 Minutes interview in any way. And the media blackout looks absolute. Instead, there's been a lot of focus on the inauguration of a new Coptic cathedral just outside Cairo. It's like the 60 Minutes interview never happened.
Let's move on to Nigeria now. Last week, the military raided several offices of the Daily Trust, one of the biggest papers in the country, arresting a couple of journalists, seizing equipment. Why this paper and why now?
Well, Richard, the Nigerian military posted a statement on Facebook saying that all this was in response to a cover story published by the Daily Trust on January 6th, which detailed a military operation planned against the armed group Boko Haram. Now, the article supposedly, and I quote, divulged classified military information, thereby undermining national security. Employees at the paper say the officers came looking for reporter Hamza Idris, who wrote the story, but when they couldn't find him, they arrested 2 other journalists instead. Now, these raids and arrests come after a series of setbacks in the government's war with Boko Haram, and with just over a month before a scheduled national election, this might be just another attempt to stifle critical reporting of the Nigerian military and its political masters.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Have you heard the conspiracy theory about Al Jazeera being a secret tool of the Israeli government? Probably not, since I just made it up and put it out there. Conspiracy theories are a growth industry. They can affect politics. Last year, one such theory may have helped re-elect Hungarian President Viktor Orban. Another led to a mass shooting in an American synagogue, and Donald Trump peddled a few of them on his way to the White House. The thing about conspiracy theories is that journalists don't really know how to cope with them. Debunking them fails to convince those who believe that the media are lying to them, and the exposure that comes with countering them introduces people to conspiracies they'd never heard of before. So, are the social media giants doing anything about the problem? Not in ways that would hurt their bottom line. Online architectures, algorithms, help keep conspiracy communities engaged and outraged. The Listening Post's Will Young now on conspiracy theories, the media, and the consequences they can have in the real world.
Végül csak hazaküldtük a szultánt a janicsárjaival, a Habsburg császárt a labancaival, a szovjeteket az elvtársaikkal, és most hazaküldjük Gyuri bácsit is a hálózatával egyetemben.
Uncle George, that is George Soros, hasn't visited Hungary in years. But Prime Minister Viktor Orbán made the Hungarian-born financier and philanthropist a central part of his re-election campaign last March. Polls show over half of Hungarians believe Soros is behind a plot to bring large numbers of migrants into the country. A conspiracy theory that the Hungarian government has been propagating for years.
George Soros is a useful character because he taps into this pre-existing far-right narrative about Jewish control. And throughout the years, we've seen this anti-Semitism turn into documented conspiracy theories.
This sort of thinking is obviously extremely useful to populist politicians who want to position themselves as someone who is a defender of the people against outside, shadowy forces who wish to weaken their nation.
We want them to come in, but we want them to...
Populist politicians such as Donald Trump.
Do you think somebody's funding the caravan? Do you think anybody's paying for the caravan? I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't. I don't know who, but I wouldn't be surprised. A lot of people say yes.
The theory that Soros was funding and orchestrating a migrant caravan traveling from Honduras to the US border had reached millions on social media.
A series of 12 suspicious packages sent to critics. One turned up Monday afternoon at George Soros' Westchester home.
By the time police found the first of a dozen pipe bombs targeting figures on the mainstream left in the mailbox of George Soros' New York residence last October. Days later, Robert Bowers allegedly shot 11 people dead at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life synagogue. He had shared several posts about the migrant caravan on Facebook and had also commented on the United States' Jewish infestation.
The conspiracy theory tying Soros to the caravan started in some private Facebook groups and in other chat forums. Then eventually people started tweeting about it. Lou Dobbs starting to sort of make associations to it.
A lot of these folks also have affiliates who are getting money from the Soros-occupied State Department.
And then from there, it really jumps into the mainstream.
There was a video shot in Guatemala. We don't really know what it shows. It's someone distributing some kind of paper, maybe tickets, maybe money at a money change. But this video was seized as evidence that some larger group was funding and, in fact, directing the caravan.
Now, this is completely baseless conspiracy theory, but it became so popular that even a congressman was promoting it. Of course, one of the exciting promises of social media is that there's no more media gatekeepers, but it's also very useful if you're a conspiracy theorist and you think that the mainstream media is not going to tell the story that you think people should hear.
Ideas that Jews, Freemasons, the Illuminati, lizard people, or aliens are secretly running world affairs have been around for centuries. But what's novel about conspiracy theories today is how they grow, evolve, and spread online. Take the breakout hit of conspiracy theorizing in Trump's America, QAnon, a conspiracy cocktail of political intrigue, gamification, real-time news analysis, and crowdsourcing. Q is thought by those who believe the theory to be a government insider, working close to Donald Trump and his allies to bring down the deep state, leaving clues on anonymous message forums for believers to interpret.
What's interesting about QAnon and sort of general modern conspiracy theorizing is that it's not a passive experience for a lot of people who believe it. Q will release a puzzle or a cryptic message in a Q drop, and then people in the QAnon community will spend a lot of time and energy and effort in an attempt to decode it. And it's very gamified, it's very fun. But the problem is that they don't actually really think it's a game. They think that they're actually genuinely uncovering some sort of secret from deep inside the government.
Key to the growth of these theories is them not just living on places like 4chan or Reddit, but then making the leap to these more widely used social media platforms.
We've got news on Flynn and a lot of other things to talk about.
Believers create these sort of quasi-news reports on YouTube to respond in nearly real time to events, to say, okay, this has happened in the news today.
Again, all these coincidences, all these timing, it's all political.
Here's how this also fits into the QAnon theory, into the sort of larger conspiracy that it explains.
If you watch a conspiracy video, it recommends another conspiracy video. And those conspiracy videos are often telling you, don't listen to the mainstream news, stay on YouTube and watch more YouTube videos where people reinforce these messages that most of the outside world says are ridiculous. You can buy into whatever conspiracy theory you want. People can create a filter bubble that's completely their own, where outside perspectives start to feel alien to them.
But apart from the platforms, there's another key bug in the media ecosystem that can enable conspiracy theories, and that's journalists themselves. Breaking news often means events overtaking the ability of news outlets to provide reliable information, and the resulting data voids online can be spaces where conspiracy theories take hold. When a student opened fire at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida last February, killing 17 people, a conspiracy theory gained currency even as events were unfolding that the shooting was faked and witnesses were in fact crisis actors. While journalists attempted to debunk the theory, they may inadvertently have been spreading it.
So I watch a news report that debunks this idea of crisis actors, but I've never heard of this term before.
I'm not an actor in any sense, way, shape, or form.
So I get out my phone and I Google the term crisis actors. Those search results bring up more conspiracy theories. The goal of conspiracy theorists and the people who want to spread these ideas around is that these conspiracy theories enter the mainstream lexicon.
The Tree of Life shooting. The alleged killer was a conspiracy theorist. He bought into this narrative that Jews were trying to control the U.S. by aiding immigrants, and for that reason, he allegedly massacred 11 people.
So I want to start by trying to scare you, okay? Ready? Yeah. George Soros.
And even as we cover this conspiracy, we can watch the real-time reaction on the far right saying, yes, they're finally talking about this incorrect thing that they believe.
Lately, conspiracy theories about Soros have moved from the outer reaches of politics to the highest reaches of government.
So it's a very strange line to walk, where you want to serve the public interest, but you don't want to help disseminate these far-right and incorrect views.
Also in the crowd last night,
Hardwired into the DNA of any conspiracy theory is the idea that the mainstream narrative is a cover-up, and that vested interests, including the media, are hiding the truth.
QAnon, a fast-growing right-wing online community,
which puts journalists in a difficult position.
A somewhat ubiquitous Q symbol.
If conspiracy theory believers don't trust you, perhaps there's no point attempting to debunk their claims. But given conspiracy theories are rising to the surface of politics and motivating individuals to commit terrible crimes, how can they be ignored?
Conspiracy theorists are trained to see all opposition as validation. They think that if the mainstream media explains why maybe elements of the conspiracy theory are absurd nonsense, it's evidence that they are onto something. If the mainstream media is attacking us, then that means that we're doing something right.
People feel very destabilized, I think, in our current news environment. When you offer a conspiracy theory, often that's a way of simplifying the world.
Q's plan save the world.
It gives people an easy answer in a world that feels scary and confusing.
It's not a conspiracy, it's fact.
That's an aspect I think we should be considering a little bit more.
I'm Justin Anon. Have a good day.
Finally, back to Egypt and the reaction in the media there to the interview that President al-Sisi did with 60 Minutes in the U.S. Talk show host Ahmed Musa faced a dilemma. He wanted to support the president because that's what he does, often in the form of a tirade night after night. And he wanted to trash 60 Minutes for asking Sisi real questions. But he couldn't actually mention the interview because to do so would make the president look bad, which would be a career ender for any Egyptian talk show host. So what did Musa do? He went on a 7-minute rant about the American media, how mighty Egypt is, without ever mentioning the 60 Minutes interview. Context? Who needs it? Confuse your audience? Who cares? We'll leave you now with the mighty Egyptian media doing as they're told once again. And we'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
ايه اللي يهز مصر؟ في حاجة تهز مصر؟ يعني في إعلام الدنيا كلها يهز مصر؟ دولة اسمها مصر العظيمة، في إعلام في العالم يهز؟ كان هز. النهارده كتب 2-3 تويتات فضائح للإعلام الأمريكي. الرئيس ترامب مش حد تاني. قال لك الإعلام الأمريكي ده عدو الشعب. أخباره كاذبة. الإعلام الأمريكي ده ما بيقولش معلومات صح. الإعلام الأمريكي ده بيفبرك. الإعلام الأمريكي ده كذاب. ترامب قال كده. أو الإعلام الأمريكي اللي النهارده الرئيس ترامب بيفضح الإعلام الأمريكي بالكامل. لم يستثني منه أي لا جورنال ولا CNN ولا CBS ولا نيويورك تايمز ولا الواشنطن بوست ولا كله